Next up, I would like to welcome two people from IBM on stage, Wolfgang Berger and Thomas Hartmann. They will speak on the integration challenges for financial institutes and maybe also touch upon a little bit on what we just heard from Victor. Welcome, welcome the two of you.
Thanks, Marcel. So we're going to start. My name is Thomas Hartmann. I'm with IBM Consulting, and I'm a payments guy for 30 years now, and doing blockchain in banking and payments for 6 years now. So I think it's a very interesting fusion of the two topics, and integrating that into a bank and making it mainstream, like we heard in the previous talk, is also what we're dealing with, what we're discussing. And looking at what's happening in the market, put the title From Splendid Isolation to Bank Integration. And just taking an outside look with a few headlines from Germany, we see some convergence between like the native crypto and the banking sector. So that's what we see here is, of course, some kind of M&A activity where crypto custodians and banks are going together. But we heard plenty of examples already in the past days. What's happening just in payments, one example is, of course, PayPal that starts to enable crypto payments and just is integrating it in their instruments, in their channels. And like we heard earlier today, the same might happen, of course, if we get CBDC as a new means of payments. Will it just be absorbed and integrated into PayPal, into the instruments or layer solutions that we have, or will something new be happening? And what are the hurdles and what are the dimensions of integration? That's what we would like to touch upon. And I would start with the customer, with the market. Yeah? Sometimes during the past days, I had the idea maybe that was a bit the third thought, but I think the customer, the market, the needs should be the ones where you actually start. And on this slide, on the left-hand side, I try to put basically the traditional payments industry, what are their strengths, what are their motivations to move ahead. And on the right-hand side, we have the crypto and digital asset, digital currency industry, so-called, quote-unquote, the players that are there. Of course, the traditional payments industry is always being charged of being rather slow and not very dynamic. And of course, part of that is, of course, being an established business, having the constraints to really deliver a return on the investments, getting a business case approved by the board. And of course, the regulation. Regulation comes first when you're established in this business. That's, of course, some things that are slowing you down. But on the other hand, if you look at the customers, also the customers, and I'm talking about everybody right now, of course, us as retail customers, but small and medium enterprises to the major enterprises across all industries, they are also not so fast to change and to adapt. And one of the examples is, of course, instant payments, SEPA instant payments, which we have now for 4-5 years now, 24/7, instantly, but wide adoption. Well, it differs from country to country across Europe, of course, partially due to the pricing. But if you look at the enterprise adoption, it's really quite another game. Yeah? And transforming into real-time payments across different industries also takes some time, and you have to find the proper use cases in order to do that. Yeah? And if you look at the right-hand side, of course, the highly dynamic crypto and digital payments scene, of course, everything is much faster there. But sometimes I have the impression that the prototype, of course, is kind of the tech-savvy customer, unless you get good layer solutions like we just saw them based on a card form factor. And then it's really a different kind of focus, also a different kind of customers, and you're looking for the use case where you would actually use it. We heard today, this morning, well, what do you really need CBDC for? So there's a wide spectrum of opinions on that. And so it's a bit more targeted in the digital space, as it seems, whereas the established players, of course, are looking at the breadth of the customers and the breadth of existing services. And in the middle of this slide, I kind of try to find the intersection, because one of the trends that the traditional industry sees are electronic wallets. We don't have kind of the Alipay yet across Europe. So that's something that could be happening, should be happening. Will it be PayPal? Will it be something from Europe? Of course, many would prefer it would be something European. And the other dimensions is the digital currency, of its CBDC or privately issued, but that's on a slightly different level. And of course, a digital wallet channel like PayPal could include CBDC or digital currency, and the customer ultimately, well, they would not care. They would need an efficient way to settle their business. And that, when it boils down to the nature of payments, and maybe that's the reason why payments are kind of late to the game, like we heard yesterday. If you have digital assets, yes, we will settle in fiat, and for the time being, this is working. And the next step will be maybe digital currency to facilitate that on-chain. But maybe that's just the nature of payments. And re-quoting one of my favorite quotes of over 20 years ago at the Cybers conference, Eric Sepkes of Citibank said, "Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, 'Today I want to make a payment.'" So it's not center stage, it's not the first thing that you want to do when you wake up in the morning, but it's essential, of course, supporting the economy, both the so-called real-world economy as well as the financial economy. And maybe that's why it has been a bit out of the focus, or maybe the bit of the second or third step. And the center issue for integrating from a market point of view is liquidity, in my point of view. And that's really key. And when we look at what we have prepared as kind of a high-level architecture, how digital payments could work, liquidity is very important. On the right-hand side, you see the asset issuing that would need to be happening. Could be a CBDC, central bank is issuing, or private money on the blockchain like we heard today. But with this asset issuance, I think also redemption should come. So if you have liquidity on the blockchain in digital form, you should be able to transfer it back to the current fiat form on account-based liquidity that we have. And we, as IBM Consulting, experience this problem in practice when we are doing prototype solutions. And it's a prepaid system where you issue a digital euro on the blockchain, then the corporate treasurer comes and says, okay, where's my money now? It's on the blockchain. Okay, that's fine. But while it's there, I cannot use it for anything else. So there was a strong interest that this liquidity could move in and out to this digital format very easily at low cost and basically 24/7. And I think for the starting phase that we will see, there will be coexistence, obviously, between digital money and our fiat system as we know it. And especially for this phase, liquidity moving freely will be very important. So that's the flip side of asset issuance. And what we put here as another important mechanism is quote, of course, that you have different players that will facilitate the exchange of different forms of digital money. And that's, of course, just as important in supporting this free flow of liquidity. And then we, of course, we have clearing and settlement, like in payment standard key functions. And as part of this architecture, the top layer, I think, is very important that we have a standard interface based on the ISO 20022 formats that we have in payments now as the global standard and being rolled out more and more. Because all the customers out there, symbolized by just a few icons, that's what they're used to. They have the payment initiation messages that they want to send, and they want to use and need to use the same format, no matter if it's a blockchain payment in the end, if it's a conventional payment, if it's instant, or if it's settled overnight. So this common infrastructure architecture, I think, is what would be best, and that's leading to another topic, which is standards in payment. It's a network industry, and if we had such a kind of standard, and we would have private money and CBDC money on such an architecture, then things could really flow very freely, and everybody could choose the means of settlement, the means of payment that best suits their needs. So that's the kind of integration towards the market, towards the different players in the payment area. And now let's switch to the other side, into an individual bank, because that's, of course, a complexity of its own. If you look at a bank, I'm a bank, I'm a payment service provider. How do I integrate this new digital form of payments? So in a way, you could think of what we saw before, the kind of outside architecture, now inside the light box on the center of this slide. So you have this new digital realm of payments with their own channels and possibilities of initiation and settlement, but you also have the legacy, the current fiat system that the bank is serving now, and of course you will need to interconnect them because the customers will want to have a unified view on all of that. And that's something that we're discussing with a lot of banks. So many banks are moving in this direction, integrating that into their existing systems, both on the digital payments and the digital asset side. So it's not just what we saw on the first slide. There's some M&A activity and different players are getting together. Also, all the major banks, basically, as we see it, are discussing the topic, are starting first projects, and are looking at how they will integrate that to get the customer a seamless service. So a new digital customer might come from the left-hand side and would want to interface directly with digital payments. Others come from the right-hand side and they will use their existing interfaces and their existing liquidity management tools in order to address this new payment channel. And I think that's the key challenge that the banks are really faced with right now. And how do I do this with a 24/7 requirement that I basically have with digital payments? And so some banks can draw on the SEPA instant experience, but to be frank, there's no banks that really do a 24/7 full operation right now, just because the volumes are low and the demand hasn't been there, but you have to be ready and integrate the digital payments basically, maybe operationally in a similar way, like you do with SEPA Instant, so you can draw on this experience that this was been possible so far and that it's working to the extent that the customers need it. And the hassle-free liquidity integration, I put it here again, is key, and that's also something that the banks will need to manage internally in these interfaces between the legacy world and the digital world. And I think that's one of the real key requirements to get this started. Trapped liquidity, in my point of view, is one of the major hurdles that is stopping wide adoption of digital payments right now, and it needs to be solved also on the technology side inside the bank. Now, Wolfgang, on to you.
Thank you. All right, so we are not looking at payments in isolation, of course. This is a bit of a zoom out. When we look into traditional bank architectures, which you see on the right side, then you have a lot of topics like AML, AFC, tax, all the traditional topics here. You have a lot of process and application landscapes. You have potentially an M&A history. So it could be quite fragmented. It could be quite difficult. It's legacy. Also, some systems are 20, 30 years plus. And then on the left side, you have the new world, which is fragmented as well, as we saw the last 2 days, but in a different way. It's very dynamic. It's very automated. You have a lot of new technologies. You have a lot of possibilities, a lot of innovation. And this needs to be brought together. And this is then the middle piece, which is the purple box mainly. And this purple box needs to be integrated in both ways. And this is where we say this is the upper and the lower L. So the upper L, which is towards the bank's traditional landscape, is essentially the bank's responsibility, including what we have in the middle, like the payments piece, what we saw before, but also now the custody piece. And then we have the integration into the new world, which is then usually a play of the custody solution providers because they integrate into the different exchanges, into issuing networks, et cetera, et cetera. In the middle, there we see quite a big part of common functions because if you're handling tokens for different characteristics, then basically it's the same problem technically. In particular, if you sit in the middle, if you're not sitting on the left side, on the left side it's completely different. But from a bank's perspective, you can leverage a lot of these commonalities. And why do you need to integrate these two worlds? AML, I think, is a very, very nice example because AML works in a way of obscuring where the money comes from and where the money goes to. And you leverage all the layering possibilities you have, so cross-country, cross-jurisdiction, cross-institute, cross-accounts, cross-individuals, cross-products, and then you finally bring it together. It could be immediately, it could be after years, so you're setting up companies, you're setting up corporates and so on. And if you're close to the blockchain, then of course it's obvious to leverage the possibility to extract the transaction history out of the blockchains. Data privacy, of course, is a big topic and very much relevant here. Yeah? Don't get me wrong, so not creating a shitstorm on this one. And then you have in the middle an AML piece as well, because you need to correlate what is happening on chain and what is happening for the specific accounts, which could be then really an account of an individual. And then you need to transfer it into the bank's world, which is then all the other products like lending, like the different payment schemes, what we saw before. So that's essentially piece-by-piece work, and you need to correlate it and integrate it. And this is a view on a typical payments flow and process. So first of all, you start collecting the information from the different products, then you merge it together, you're then starting to monitor the transactions, then you discover certain alerts, then you start correlating it, then you have the alert and case investigation, so you're bringing together the information from the different transactions, from the different individuals, how the individuals are interacting. So is it the same company? Is it the same group? Is it across countries? And then you finally do a suspicious activity report towards the FIUs. So what is now a bit different, and this came already with SEPA Instant Payment, it's near real time. So you need to react quickly. And if you're in doubt, you need to reject. Otherwise, payment, for instance, is okay, or a transfer is okay, or a token transfer is okay. And then you need to feed back your results into the monitoring ideally, so using AI mechanisms, etc. And this is then creating a closed loop integration, so utilizing all the mechanisms. And you have now money laundering mechanisms everywhere. So you have it also on the blockchain, where you have a lot of mixers and tumblers. You have very different possibilities there, which is, of course, bad from a regulator's perspective in money laundering, but this is anyway a race between the money launderers and regulators and the banks. But there is now, of course, also a big opportunity. And this opportunity is that you can correlate all the transactions which are sitting on chain, and you have a much better view and possibility to really detect money laundering. But of course, data privacy is a bigger concern on the other side, so we shouldn't overdo it here. But it's a big opportunity to really do this across banks and get into a much better setup here. So how do you do this in a secure way? So just quickly going back to the purple box, because here you have the keys. You have the account structure, the keys, and you need to be careful with it. So basically I could skip that slide because Seamus did it already yesterday. And this is the Linux one, what we are providing as IBM, or HyperProtect. And the HyperProtect comes with a set of very unique services or capabilities. So we start by creating a master key that's solely based on a smart card basis. So we do a key ceremony. We are creating the master key inside the HSM. The HSM stores the master key, and you also have mechanisms if you're not trusting what's going on inside the machine to really zero out the master key, and then the entire machine stops working And this is a very, very unique feature. The HSM itself is level 4 certified, which is military grade. So it's protected against all the physical attacks. And if a physical attack gets detected, then the master key is serial out as well. And why doing this? So what's happening now? Why doing this? Because if something goes wrong and somebody is misusing your keys, then 1 minute, okay. Then you can suddenly stop and prevent any transactions from happening. And this is then also connected to secure image builds, so where you can safely build the images containing the operations using the keys, so that you're safe on that side as well. You have secure boot functions, you have secure execution, and this is also available on the cloud, as Jim has also said yesterday already. And this is quite a fancy piece of technology what we have here. So what we do as IBM in general, quickly on that one, so it's not only the consulting piece, but we also have quite a lot in technology. Of course, Hyperledger, you know. We also have IBM Research. They're heavily working on graph algorithms and detecting anti-money laundering or money laundering situations. We have a huge department on encryption, where we are spending a lot of time in fully homomorphic encryptions, which is then the next generation, and already some pre-implementations are out. And of course, we have a big network of partners. So this is also quite changing in IBM, where we are opening up to partner also with technology outside of IBM, so no longer the entire blue stack. And this is very important in this space. So we have a total of 100 plus partners in the
really need to wrap up.
Yes, I'm done.
Okay, then I'm sorry. Thank you very much.